Welcome to Massive Beers. My name is Matt. We do the beer stuff here, and kind of excited for this one. A little bit of a friend beer, if you will. Barrel Monks. This is their Neon Skyline IPA. This comes courtesy of my boy Ralph. If you don't know who Ralph is, that's kind of weird, especially if you've watched my channel through most of its existence. Ralph is the OG king shit of Beer Mountain when it comes to beer mails. And he used to send me an insane amount of beer mails. Longer story, longer. He's now a brewer, head brewer at Barrel Monks Brewing. Kind of worked himself up from watching this dude's channel to brewing all kinds of fancy pants beers, and this be one of them. He just sent this off. I received it yesterday. It's actually a collaboration between Barrel Monks Brewing and the Tank Brewing Company, Neon Skyline IPA. It was bottled on 6/21. Today is the 28th, so you're talking about 7 days old. And it says here, brewed in collaboration with our good friends at Tank Brewing Company. This modern take on a West Coast IPA is a straw yellow with abundance of citrus and tropical notes. You'll notice a smooth, lingering bitterness and a balance of subtly sweet, cracky malt base. This classic IPA is sure to light up your nights. 6.5% alcohol by volume. I get all kinds of hot and bothered when there's hoppy beer in bottles. This kind of does it for me. I like this label. It's probably one of the nicer ones I've seen from the new ilk when it comes from beers from Barrel Monks. Not that I've always been a big fan of their labels. But the thing about this label that really kind of makes me kind of happy is that it's got that nice kind of classic 750 milliliter shaped kind of Barrel Monks shield kind of die cut on it. So I kind of dig that. So there you go. And I talked about in the unboxing about neonish colors in print. It's very hard to pull off, and they do a really good job with it there. So anyway, yeah. It looks like, it looks like a new school West Coast IPA, and then a lot of these West Coast IPAs tend to have a subtle haze to it. Classically, this would be clear as clear could be, but you can see it's not going to be confused with a hazy turbid beer. You can definitely see through it, but it has a subtle haze to it. This nice kind of white, super tight, slightly soapy kind of head to it, and that subtle straw-like, almost like kind of saison-y kind of body to it. So it looks the part of an old school, new school. Old school hazy? Does that make any sense? Didn't get a nose. There's not a huge like resinous West Coast vibe on here, but there is a pininess. It falls short of being like ultra danky pininess. It's more of a straight kind of like I was gonna be like car freshener pine, but it's much nicer than that. I think that does it a little bit dirty by defining it that way or describing it that way. But it has this nice kind of pininess to it, a little bit more sweeter kind of pininess to it, and then throw on top of that this really nice kind of candied orange, very much a marmalade slash melon kind of characteristic here. Very much of the old school East meets West kind of IPA. Man, the way that orange, that candied orange, when I say candy, I mean more like marmalade kind of orange sweetness, not this hard candy kind of sweetness, in combination with that pininess. That's not overly bittering, but you know there's going to be a nice balance between both of those hop characteristics is quite nice. And that sweetness, that perception of sweetness is coming from that crackery malt bill. It's a bit bigger than what I would describe as crackier. It's a little bit more sweeter, a little bit more crystal slash touch of two-row, very much leaning kind of crystal malt for me. Don't know the actual bill on this, but that's kind of how it comes off to me. And very much a malt forward beer in a very, very positive way. A lot of people view that as very much a negative, especially when it comes to IPAs, albeit even the West Coast ones nowadays. But it has a nice sturdy malt bill that comes off sweet without being cloying, and just kind of props up and plays with that kind of back and forth between that orange marmalade thing and nice kind of sweeter kind of pininess. Let's dive in. Cheers, y'all. Yeah, there's a decent bittering here. And it definitely dips into like a resinous kind of vibe. It's not over the top, it's not hyper aggressive, but you're not going to confuse this with not being a West Coast beer and not confuse it with it not being a bittering beer. It's the first thing that jumps out to you is that West Coast influence, that big West Coast kind of bitterness. It's got a really nice mouthfeel to it. What I would describe as a full old school West Coast or old school IPA kind of mouthfeel. It's not going to be confused with thick, especially when you're talking about beers nowadays that are pretty much lean into thick, super thick. Florida, I'm looking at you, kind of things have to be motor oiled in order to be called thick. But when you're talking about a full mouthfeel, especially when it comes from a malt-driven kind of beer, especially when you're talking about these kind of old school influenced kind of IPAs, it's got this really nice. It doesn't get to the point of like silky satiny, but it has this kind of smooth fullness to it. The sweetness on this is perfect. You know, on the nose, even though you can't smell sweetness, you get those precursors, and I thought it was going to be a bit more of that kind of orange marmalade, which it still is. But when you combine or throw on top that hefty amount of that bitterness, that nice kind of pininess, that little bit of dankiness on there, and a touch of resininess that you don't really get in the nose, but is there in the taste, it really does temper a lot of that sweetness. You still get that orange. It's very much leading the way for me. You do get a lot of melon characteristic with this too, but it's very much an orange marmalade-y thing that comes up a little bit less sweet than you'd expect based off of the nose, but not necessarily in a bad way. And comes off as such an old soul when it comes to these kind of IPAs. It's very much new school. The hops ring a bit more candy, a bit more kind of new school, a bit more bursting from the fruit portion of the show than you would have gotten back in the day, even on an East Coast kind of beer. But when you throw in that less ultra resinous, but resinous enough kind of bittering pininess, and then you combine it with that new school kind of bursting flavor, orange/melon kind of combination, it is all the parts of what I think everybody originally fell in love with when they got into kind of IPA, more specifically West Coast IPA, but bringing in enough of that new school just make this beer super drinkable. I mean, 6.5%, it drinks way bigger than 6.5%. This beer probably, drinking this blind, I'm thinking I'm eking towards 7.5, 8 on this. That's how it kind of comes off impact-wise. Best beer you ever made, brother. I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, each one gets, well, they can be a bit different. They're quite nice, but I think this, for me personally, this is quite a leap. Just because one, it's squeaky clean. You know what I mean? It is clean as clean could be, as far as just precision in the way it's brewed. There's nothing here as far as negativity. Granted, we're looking at a week old here. In a month, are we going to see a little hop creep, a little diacetyl kind of creep in there? I don't know. But as it's drinking right now, super squeaky clean, really well made, and really nothing negative at all to speak of in any form or fashion. Just the way that takes that old school kind of West Coast influence, adds a nice dollop of that new school, but stays true to that kind of just beer flavor beer, for the lack of a better term, because you're not getting a brewer sugar kind of thing here. You're not getting this kind of let's hop it to no end just to get the expression out of what we need. Sure, there's probably a copious amounts of hops in here, but you're talking about 6.5%, how punchy and clean it is, but at the same time how robust and aggressive it is. It's that cool kind of balance between the two, because it is a drinking beer. It's not a session beer, obviously, high ABV, very aggressive, but it's a drinking beer. I could put down a couple of these, no problem, and I think that's a testament, especially with how vibrant the beer comes off. Is it one of the better West Coast IPAs that I've had as of late? Yeah, it is. Mount Rushmore status. Yeah, it is. It is. It's hard to call it a true Westie because of that new school and decent amount of East Coast kind of influence, especially from the fruity side of things with hops. But it's a West Coast IPA at its core. And I'd be hard-pressed to find that's something I had markedly better in the past, several months. So yeah, Mount Rushmore status for me. And if you like West Coasties, but you like new school hops, is going to be your jam. It is. I'm going to tell you. If you like those, you'll like this. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, Barrel Monks, man. Have you had their beers? Have you had their beers back in the day? A lot of Belgian-influenced beers, a lot of 750s. Has that been your exposure when it comes to Barrel Monks Brewing? Have you had a bunch of their new school beers? Have you had a bunch of their IPAs, their Enigmas? This beer in particular, have you had it? I doubt it. Probably it's going to be less than 2 weeks old by the time this gets posted. But if you've had their beers, if you've been to the brewery, if you've had some of Ralph's beers, if you've had this beer in particular, I'd love to hear from you. All that's fun stuff down there. So there you go. A review in the books. Hopefully you guys enjoyed as much as I did. Hopefully you're enjoying a little bit of West Coast new school influence. Hope we'll see you next time. Cheers, y'all.